Welcome to Living Love, a podcast about how to live a heart-centered life. My name is Victoria Price, and this is the start of Season 2, aka Chapter 1 of my book, Living Love, 12 Heart-Centered Practices to Transform Your Life. Yep, Season 1, which ended sometime last summer, covered the intro to the book. But as it all turned out, the timing for Season 2 is perfect because this chapter is called Out with the Old, In with the New, and this episode is about moving from problem to practice. What do I mean by that? Well, the best way I can explain it is through the phenomena of New Year's resolutions. How appropriate, right? Because this podcast is coming out with 5 days until the start of 2026. At the end of every year, most of us make a list of New Year's resolutions or intentions. Coming out of the holiday season, having overeaten at parties and overspent on gifts can feel like the perfect time to think about what we want to do better as we face the beautiful blank slate of a brand new year. According to Inc. magazine, people not only make resolutions, but we also make the same resolutions. Dieting or eating healthier, exercising, losing weight, saving more and spending less, quitting smoking, reading more, drinking less, and or finding a new job. When you hear that list, what comes up for you? Probably a few things you've wanted to do yourself, just like me. But what I also see is precisely what makes New Year's resolutions so notoriously unreliable. So unreliable, in fact, that studies have shown that although 60% of us make resolutions every year, less than 8% of us achieve them. That doesn't stop us, though. Next year we'll start all over again, determined to believe that this time it will be different. Kind of like me and this podcast, right? I promised myself I would show up to this book like I didn't during the pandemic and get a whole podcast recorded and published over the course of a year. Then I hit the road for 6 months and out the window went that resolution. Welcome to the 92%. Now, I can blame it on legit stuff, work, travel for work, etc., but the life gets in the way excuse is kind of lame when what life is getting in the way of is, well, living. So, going back, when we look at that list, what I mostly see is fear. What do I mean by that? I see a lot of things we don't like about ourselves, our bad habits, our guilty pleasures, usually more guilt than pleasure in the end, and mostly our fear that we will never change. And so, once again, we circle back to Guillermo del Toro's invocation for this book, because I really do believe that every single choice we make every single day comes down to fear or love. Which one we choose determines our experience and our outcome in every area of our lives. Which is why, if we make resolutions from a place of fear, even though it might not feel that way, they usually fail. I'm going to reiterate what I just said because understanding this is key to pretty much everything. Every day we choose between fear and love in all that we do or say or feel. Now, when we were little, choosing love came naturally. You can see it in the laughing, smiling faces of kids. Even children who are challenged by illness, poverty, or abuse find their way back to joy far more easily than adults who seem to have everything. As we get older, our choices seem to become more fear-based, even choices to be or do better. This is because we're bombarded with fear-based messages everywhere we go. We've been hearing them our whole lives from our parents and our peers, our teachers, and the media. Fear-based stories were implanted in all of us, passed down from generation to generation in unconscious ways. The fears that feel the most real, and therefore the most insidious and hard to identify, are the fears that came into our lives disguised as loving advice. I'm telling you this for your own good, to make you a better person, to help you out in the long run. Those often go in deep and take such firm root that slowly but surely we begin to lose our easy reliance on the love we felt and expressed so freely as children. To be fair, much of that so-called loving advice comes from the fears of our parents, their fears of not being a good parent, for example. My mother was terrified that she would be judged by who I was and who I turned out to be. She was an older mother, 45 years old when she had me. All of her friends' children were in their teens when I was a toddler. She was embarrassed not to know what to do when I cried or behaved a certain way. They had all gone through it together, but she felt like she was struggling to do it alone. She was afraid to ask for help, and the more afraid she became, the less help she sought. She came to believe that my behavior was a reflection on her competence as a parent. She was afraid of how I would act. And so pretty soon I was afraid that how I would act would trigger her fear or anxiety. It took me a long time to realize that my whole life was a cycle of react, resist, rebel, versus people-pleasing, all of which was the result of being afraid. Most of us learn our fears as little kids. So by the time we get to the point of making resolutions as adults, fear has been driving the bus for a very long time, sometimes in very subtle ways. For example, when we say that we want to stop overeating or overspending or overindulging, when we say we want a better job or improved habits, what we usually mean is something is missing from our lives. Health, money, fitness, balance, peace of mind, which is to say, we start from a place of lack. Lack is one of fear's fundamental tactics. It keeps us focused on our worry about what we're living without, on our anxiety about what we do not have enough of, and on our agitation about what we've lost. Even if we say, I want to eat healthier, what we're really saying underneath that positive intention is that we're afraid we're not healthy. When we start from what we're afraid is missing and then go around trying to find that, we usually start by changing our habits. What we don't see is that anytime our lives become problem-based, in other words, we are perpetually trying to fix a problem, we are destined to remain stuck in the same mindset that created that problem. Why? Because the mindset that creates every problem is fear. The mindset that heals every problem is love. And for those of you not looking at the book, that is Love with the Big L, which we talked about in Season 1 with the podcast, and we'll talk about a lot. When we start with a problem, we have chosen fear, which means that fear will keep choosing us. When we start with a practice, however, we're choosing love. By practicing love, we begin living love. That's why practice works when resolutions rarely do. Now this is where we get to the fun part. Remember when I said that transformation happens when we start doing something instead of just talking about doing something? Well, there's something I would like you to do right now, especially if you're thinking about your New Year's resolutions. In my book, there are sections in every chapter with a headline in bold print that says, "Write this down." These are sections where you get to engage in practices. I'll be going through these in the podcast, but to really work through this, you might get the physical book itself so you can refer to it or get it online. It's helpful to look at something and go back to it. But while you're at it, get yourself a journal as well, or use your iPad or Kindle or Remarkable, whatever you write on. And if you are a pen and paper writer, be sure to get yourself a pen you love writing with. And call that journal your Heart-Centered Practice Journal. These practices really do work, so I'm going to encourage you to please give them a try. But before we get to using either the book or the journal, here's the first thing I would like you to do this week. I want you to pull out a blank sheet of paper, not in a notebook, and write this at the top in capital letters: things I want to change in my life. Now, I'm going to ask you to make a list of anything and everything in your life that you would like to change. But before you do, there are a few things you need to know. This is only for you. No one else will see it. There is no right way to approach this. And this is not etched in stone. It's not a list that has to last forever. Start writing down the things you wish were different right now. These can be big things or little things, things you dislike and would like to dump, or something or perhaps someone you wish were not exactly the way it or they are. Approach this list any way you like, but if you need some ideas, here are a few. If you're thinking about your New Year's resolutions, start there. Every year, what do you vow to change? Write those down. If you are someone who's given a lot of thought to your big issues, write those down. The big issues are those areas that have felt most immune to change, the superbugs of our souls, so to speak, resistant to seemingly every known cure, and those are usually what we desire to change the most. Or you can try the my old stories approach. Ask yourself what stories you find yourself telling over and over again. After my parents got divorced, my teacher said, every relationship I've been in has. See what comes up for you if you write down those prompts. It doesn't matter where you start because ultimately everything circles back. Big issues such as money, health, love, purpose, happiness, freedom, peace, joy, balance, fulfillment, confidence, stability, passion, all get translated into resolutions like spending less, creating a budget, eating more consciously, being less judgmental, getting rid of the idea that there are things we do not deserve, and all of those usually come from some old stories we've been listening to since time immemorial. Some of us have our big issues at the tip of our tongue. Some of us keep telling our old stories ad nauseum. Some of us prefer to focus on what we hope will change in our lives. Most of us do and think and feel all of these. Whatever approach you take, just write down anything and everything that you want to change in your life right now. Now hit pause. Do not listen to the rest of this until you've finished doing that. Trust me on this. It'll have a lot more impact if you do it this way. Just finish that list. And once you've finished it, it's all on a piece of paper. Then listen to what you're supposed to do with that piece of paper. When you have emptied everything inside of you onto it, put what you've written into an envelope. Write things I want to change on the outside of that envelope. Then rip, shred, burn, destroy the whole darn thing. Get rid of it, because this is not where our journey together starts. You see, what I've just asked you to do is what most of us have done our entire lives. Identify our problems so we can start from there and try to fix them. It's time for a whole new approach. The heart-centered approach of living love. Thanks for rejoining me on this journey. Like you, I'm trying something new. Let's all become that 8%, shall we? Join me next week as we move from problem to practice. Happy New Year, everyone.